So, you're moving to Cincinnati, or at least you're thinking about it. Or maybe you're not thinking about it, but someone else in your life is. Maybe your spouse has a new job offer from some company in Cincinnati. Maybe that's where they grew up and they're trying to move back closer to family. But you're not convinced. And in my opinion, maybe you shouldn't be, because I moved here from out of state and there was plenty of advice to go around. Most of it was bad. So I've got 20 points that you're probably already hearing from different sources on the web and from people you know about Cincinnati and what you have to know. And make sure you stick around to the end of this video, where we're actually going to cover the things you're hearing on YouTube and how they might be wrong too. Some of these points have some truth to them, and some of them are just completely wrong or outdated opinions of Cincinnati. But we're going to go over all of that. And by the end of this video, you're going to have a better idea of if this city is for you. And you'll hear me say this again, but I would love your comments on this video, because there is no shortage of bad advice when it comes to moving to Cincinnati. Before we jump into the 20 though, I should remind you that I am a realtor here in Cincinnati. I'm licensed in Ohio and Kentucky. So if you end up deciding that this is the move for you, I'd love to hear from you and love to help you acclimate to life in Cincinnati, just like I did about 11 years ago. To be honest, I wasn't excited about it. I told my now wife that I'd give it 2 years and then we could move somewhere more interesting. But guess what? I'm still here. And on the other side of things, we see people move out of Cincinnati all the time, and most of them come back. There's a reason for that. So no matter if you're excited or you're just trying to make the best of it, I'd love to help you make that move to Cincinnati. But we're gonna get real on this video, because it's not for everyone. But if it's for you, all of my contact information is in the video description. I've broken these tips or advice down to 6 different categories based on where you're hearing it. And first of all, if you're moving here and you know nothing about Cincinnati, you're probably moving here because you just got a job offer. Or maybe someone in your life, a spouse or boyfriend, girlfriend, got a job offer and you're considering tagging along for that trip. Well then, the first person giving you advice about this move, or the first person telling you about the city, is probably someone in HR at that hiring company. The tricky thing about this is it's probably someone who barely knows you. Someone that you might not have known a month or a few months ago, or even just a couple weeks ago. Here are the 3 things I think people hear most from getting advice about Cincinnati from HR. All right, this first topic, it's affordable. That's relatively true. It is a more affordable city when you're comparing to most of the coastal cities or even other mid-sized cities in other regions of the country, like the Sun Belt or Texas. But just because there are affordable options doesn't mean the home you want and the lifestyle you want is going to be an affordable option as well. There's a pretty big difference from neighborhoods like Hyde Park or Oakley to some of the most affordable areas. And guess what? When you're talking about affordable, we're all talking about averages and medians. So is there an affordable option? Yeah, probably. We have a lot more affordable options than most other areas. Is it the option you want? Maybe, and maybe not. I will say on this point though, is there are typically pretty affordable options next to areas that are not so affordable. And they can work for some of the people that are really trying to be in a certain part of town or a certain neighborhood to get the amenities of that neighborhood. So that's something that we discuss all the time when our client's budget is limited. However, they have a specific reason to be in a specific popular part of town. The next point here is one that I really don't like. And I hear all the time. I hear people tell me that, HR or someone older at the company gave them the advice that this is a donut city. We do have great donuts, first of all, but that's not what they're saying. They're saying that everyone lives in this outer ring of the city, that everyone is commuting from very far away from the suburbs. And this is pretty outdated. Now, certainly, if you're looking for the suburban lifestyle, we have plenty of options. But there's an assertion with what those people are saying. They're saying that you don't really have options inside the city, that you're really not going to want to live in the city limits or even near the city. You're gonna get further out to the suburbs. In fact, some of our most popular areas are right in the city of Cincinnati. And depending on your lifestyle and type of job you're moving here, might be some of the best options for you. This opinion is going back to decades of the city shrinking and disinvestment in the city. There was definitely an era not that long ago where people were leaving Cincinnati and they were going to the suburbs at a really high rate. But Cincinnati's growing, and that's significant because it's growing for the first time in decades. I very proudly live inside the city limits of Cincinnati. I'm raising 2 kids here. They're going to go to public school in Cincinnati. So even if you are someone who is raising a family and you really care about the schools for your kids, you have options in the city. You don't have to move to the suburbs. But if you want to be in the suburbs, we've got plenty of options. And lastly, from HR, you'll need a car. This is mostly true. I can't really fight this one so much. There are a select few neighborhoods where you can get by, and I know people that do, and I know people that are really happy to get by without owning a car. In my opinion though, public transport's not that great. The bus system is much better, but after the bus system, there's not really much public transit at all. The streetcar gets a lot of headlines, but it's not taking you very far. You can go from OTR through downtown to the banks and back. However, though, I don't know a lot of people that are spending a lot of time on both ends of that line. When it comes to nightlife, you tend to be an OTR person or a person who goes to the banks. The caveat to that is if you're an OTR person and you also want to go to a Reds or Bengals game, you might take the streetcar. And of course, if you live in OTR or the banks, you might take the streetcar to get to your office downtown. That's great. It's just not serving a lot of the city. So depending on your lifestyle and where you plan to live, you probably do need a car. All right, you're making this move and you're making the move from a city far away or maybe not that far away. You're probably talking to your friends. Your friends probably don't want you to leave, but they've got advice too. And I think these 4 things are some of the most common things you're going to hear from your friends that don't really know a lot about Cincinnati. If you have a friend that used to live here or grew up here, they might know some things, but just know that the city has changed a lot in the last few years and certainly in the last 10 and 20 years. So even their opinions may be outdated. But let's start at the top. Isn't that where they put chili on spaghetti? Yeah. I mean, it is. It's true. We are known for our Cincinnati chili, or you're going to hear it referred to as Skyline Chili a lot. Skyline is a brand. It is the most popular brand in the city. A couple things on this, though. The food scene here is actually amazing. It's one of the first things that caught my attention that led me to stay here. You may have picked up from previous videos or earlier in this video where I alluded to I moved here because of my now wife. I have very fond memories of the experience of dating in Cincinnati, and the restaurants were a huge part of that. Guess what? There was basically 0 Skyline chili consumed in that dating experience. In fact, don't tell anyone, my wife's not from here. She doesn't like Skyline chili. A lot of us don't. When it comes down to it, my opinion is the infatuation with Cincinnati style chili is mostly nostalgia. They're calling back to their childhood, especially for someone who grew up here and moved away. I know the urge to get Skyline is strong. We actually have Skyline in the airport now. So a lot of people get off the plane and they get Skyline in the airport. But don't think our food scene is just chili on top of spaghetti. Cincinnati's just a flyover city, right? This is totally wrong. I know a lot of people treat it like a flyover city. A lot of people don't really understand what's happening in Cincinnati. However, you are going to be amazed by the things that we have to do in Cincinnati. This city has a ton of history. A lot of people don't realize Cincinnati is one of the oldest established cities in the US that's not on the East Coast. To drive that point home, if you're watching a movie that is featuring New York City in the late 1800s or early 1900s, you're probably actually seeing Cincinnati. A lot of those movies are filmed here, and those scenes specifically would likely be in a neighborhood called Over the Rhine, which is the largest and most well-preserved collection of Italianate architecture from the mid to late 1800s. But it's not just history in Cincinnati. We do get a little bit nostalgic. We have an amazing art scene. We have amazing museums. The symphony here, as well as the opera, are not just some of the oldest in the country, but very highly renowned in what they do across the country. And of course, people definitely know Cincinnati for our sports teams. So I won't go into that so much, but do know there's a lot more than sports here in Cincinnati. Depending on where you're moving from and your friend group, you're probably hearing from people saying things like, oh, it's like super conservative there, right? Not exactly. If you're talking about the city of Cincinnati, that wouldn't be reflective of how the city voted. I don't really know how far you'd have to go back because as long as I've been around, it has voted one way. It's not conservative. Now, if you get outside of the city into some of the more suburban or rural areas, yeah, it is more conservative. But guess what? That's the same in every other city in this country as well right now. So just like wherever you live, if you're living in a neighborhood or a part of town where you're around like-minded people, we have that here too. And it doesn't really matter how you vote because it's true for either side of whatever issue you care most about. But this is one area that I think Cincinnati is really misunderstood. And I could go in more detail, but we're not gonna have time on this video. And this last one might be the most wrong on the entire list. It's just cornfields and strip malls, right? Well, no, it's not. As far as the strip malls, Cincinnati has some of the most diverse and historic architecture in the country. I don't need a caveat for that statement. I'm not saying in the Midwest, I'm not saying for smaller or mid-sized cities, in the country. And I don't remember seeing a cornfield in the city of Cincinnati. And I know cornfields, I grew up in rural Indiana. In a lot of ways, I couldn't get away from being surrounded by cornfields quick enough. So I left for college, and then after college, I went to the city. But this other point about cornfields is, typically we think cornfields, you think flat, and people think of that in Cincinnati. Also very wrong. It's a very hilly area. And if you want to test my theory, just jump on a bicycle. You're going to know exactly how hilly this city is. You're probably getting advice from your parents or other older family members, and they might be a little bit off base as well. Just remember when you're getting that advice from a family member that you really share nothing in common or very little in common with, that you're probably not going to be picking the same city or the same area to live in either. If Uncle Rick has a crazy opinion at the Thanksgiving table, he's probably got a crazy opinion about the city that you're going to move to, and he really knows nothing about as well. So the first thing that you might be hearing from them is, why would you move there? Because they think there's nothing here, or they think that everyone is leaving. And that second part was kind of true before, but that hasn't been true in decades. It's a really exciting time in Cincinnati because we get to see the city go through this revitalization. The only point I'll add to that might be a little bit disappointing for you is it was really exciting about 10 years ago when it was starting. But those neighborhoods are much more well-established. In fact, I would say all of Cincinnati is much more well-established than it was 10 years ago. And if we go back another 10 years, you're gonna get to the root of this next opinion. Isn't Cincinnati kind of dangerous? Well, I can tell you, if you were moving here 20 plus years ago, this might have been a more valid opinion. Cincinnati was catching a lot of headlines about violent crime and the police response to that violent crime, which wasn't good. And I don't think anyone's going to argue with you on that last part. Cincinnati is a much safer city than it was 20 plus years ago, and the Cincinnati police has been credited with being one of the earliest police forces to adopt new techniques to address some of the police violence issues we've seen in this country. Cincinnati's not perfect on either of those sides. However, it is much better, and I don't think anyone who is saying Cincinnati is a dangerous city has much merit to their argument. You might also hear the same group say things like, isn't that near Kentucky? And my response to that is, yeah, it's 100% true, and that's a good thing for our region. In fact, the northern Kentucky side of our city, which I would consider just one city, even though it's not technically true, is some of the most exciting parts of the area. There is an energy in northern Kentucky that I think a lot of young professionals gravitate toward, especially if you're hearing about OTR, or Over the Rhine as it's called, and you start looking at prices and you realize that maybe it's not as affordable as you were hoping. Or maybe you like Over the Rhine, but you'd rather live in a single family home. Well, a lot of my suggestions would include places on the southern side of the river if that's what you're looking for. And that's not to mention just the access to everything the rest of Kentucky has to offer. And there's a lot there. A lot of them aren't great. I think one of the most common points I'm seeing on Reddit is this: you have to live on the east side or you have to live on the west side. And you're getting both. One, I think it's a mistake to get caught up in East Side versus West Side for anyone. If you already live here or if you're moving here, I think that's a little bit of a mistake. The people making the argument for the East Side typically will talk about how there's more to do and it's a more exciting place, or the homes are nicer. And people making the argument for the West Side are going to say things like, oh, it's more real, you've got more down-to-earth people, it's more affordable. But on either of those points, you can find either of those options on either the East Side or the West Side, or even Northern Kentucky, which I think just gets left out of this conversation, even though it shouldn't. Lastly, on the East Side versus West Side, even add in Northern Kentucky, those are 3 options, and I still don't think that encompasses all of the options. On an earlier video, I've made a point of saying that there's about 8 different subregions of our city or metro area. So that's a good video to watch if you are diving in deep and looking for the specific area you want to live. You're going to find really strong opinions from people on Reddit about Oktoberfest, Geta, Skyline Chili, opening day, Flying Pig Marathon, some of the bigger events and most popular food items in Cincinnati. Obviously, all of these are true and not true at the same time because they're just opinions. A couple points that I'll point out that may not be clear for someone who has never been here. Opening day is basically a holiday in Cincinnati. When I moved here, I moved to work at a company, and the HR person accidentally put my first day as opening day, and I basically showed up to an office with nobody in it. Oktoberfest is kind of a big deal, but it's also pretty easy to skip. A lot of people kind of think that's more of like a tourist thing to do. And another big day to mark on the calendar for anyone moving to Cincinnati is Labor Day. Out of the 3 main summer holidays, Memorial Day, 4th of July, and Labor Day is probably the biggest of those 3 in Cincinnati. Cincinnati has really always gone big for Labor Day. You're probably seeing from people on Reddit saying that there's no nightlife, or there's no a lot of things, like whatever they had in whatever city that they were in before. My point to those people is Cincinnati's not boring. You are. Because yeah, if you're moving here from a place like New York or LA or even Chicago, you might have to look a little bit harder to find that thing that you just really loved about your city. But if you do look, you'll probably find that we have basically everything that any of those cities offer. A couple more international flights would be helpful, but there's plenty of entertainment options in Cincinnati. You're probably going to see things like everyone's a diehard Bengals or Reds fan, and you're just going to have to be a big Bengals or Reds fan, and that's not really true, because first of all, that's not even all of our professional sports teams, and some of our most diehard fans are actually FC Cincinnati fans. We have a huge soccer following in Cincinnati. But, you know, if you're falling for these tips on Reddit, you might be surprised to know that not everyone's a sports fan at all. Personally, I root for the teams back in my home state of Indiana. I'll still root for the Reds and FC Cincinnati, where I didn't have teams in those leagues in the state I grew up in, but I'll even root for the Bengals because it's just more fun when the local teams are winning. But I'm not going to root for them against my teams. If the Bengals are playing the Colts, I'm rooting for the Colts. I'm just a little bit concerned that my sons are going to grow up to be Bengals fans because there's a lot of disappointment involved in being a Cincinnati sports fan. On social media, I think you'll see these 3 opinions very often, and I think social media is pretty friendly to Cincinnati. Of course, Cincinnati will catch some strays when it doesn't really deserve to, but you'll see things like Cincinnati's a hidden gem, and I think that's certainly true. And it has a lot to do with the national perception of the city and how it's been very far off for a long time. The great thing about Cincinnati is, like I said earlier, we do have everything that you can find in any of these other cities. The key difference here is the people here can afford to enjoy those things because our homes are more affordable and life in general is more affordable. So I have friends that are in expensive coastal cities, but I get to do more fun things than them very often because they have to pay so much in their mortgage and rent. And guess what? We also have an airport, so I can go to their cities too. You're probably seeing things like Cincinnati has like Midwest vibes with more hills and older buildings. That's pretty spot on. I'd add that there's a little bit of Southern influence there too. I'm not calling Cincinnati a Southern city. I think it's very much still a Midwest city, but you start to get more of a Southern accent the further you go into Kentucky. You get a lot more y'alls and a lot less ope, but I think that meeting of cultures is part of what makes Cincinnati great. On a less positive note, I think you're going to see a lot of opinions that Cincinnati is a boring city unless you're a parent or unless you're into craft beer or just drinking in general. or you're into sports. It's funny because you find all of these different opinions that Cincinnati is this one homogenous thing, but you keep finding other opinions that Cincinnati is just this one homogenous other thing. It's just not true. For most of the time I've lived in Cincinnati, I wasn't a parent. And it was great. For the last 3+ years, I have been a parent. And frankly, I think it's a great place to raise kids too. You can find the Cincinnati that you're wanting to find if you're trying hard enough. Certainly get frustrated with people who want to make Cincinnati one thing just because it's convenient for them to not admit that they're not really putting enough effort into what they're trying to accomplish or what they're trying to be a part of. And when it comes to being a part of something, being a part of something, a crucial part of something, is much more attainable in Cincinnati than it is a lot of the larger or more coastal cities. So if you want to be involved, Cincinnati is a great place to be involved with no matter what it is that you're looking for. And I promised you earlier in this video that we would get to what you're seeing on YouTube that might not be as true as it seems. A common opinion on YouTube you're going to see is Cincinnati is one of the most affordable cities in the US. And it's getting less true, and there are other caveats to that as well. Because I am someone who pays a lot of attention to this as a realtor. You'll start to notice that Cincinnati is on the list of the cities that are seeing the highest year-over-year increase in rents almost every year. It's getting more and more expensive to be a renter in Cincinnati. It's getting more and more expensive to be a renter or a homeowner in Cincinnati, but on the rent side, it's getting worse. I get a lot of calls from out-of-state investors asking about buying in Cincinnati, and my personal standpoint on this is, well, you're going to have to meet a few different criteria for us to even really have much of a conversation on it. My preference is to work with people who are trying to find a home for them to live in and for them to love their life in. It's not really working for institutional investors who want to buy from several states or half the country away. But I've got a lot of friends who do work for those people, and they're not slowing down. My priority is keeping Cincinnati locally owned. You're definitely going to find people on YouTube that say you have to try Skyline and Graders and La Rosa's. On each of those, I love Graders, first of all. You can try it or not. We have other options, other local options, and frankly, we have any other option that you're going to find in other major cities. I rarely eat Skyline or any other Cincinnati chili. I'm not against it. I prefer it on a coney rather than spaghetti. So I'm not a snob when it comes to Cincinnati chili, but it's not something I'm having all the time. And La Rosa's pizza, I really don't like it. I can't fault anyone else who does, but the sauce is sweet. It's got a lot of cheese on it, which I'm actually pro a lot of cheese, but it's just not my style of pizza. But I said it earlier in this video that the food scene cannot be defined by these few local delicacies, if you will. All right, and lastly, when I'm looking at YouTube for Cincinnati content, I see a lot of people that are really focused in on the suburbs. It makes it look like everyone in Cincinnati lives on a cul-de-sac in a suburb somewhere, and that's just not the case. This goes back to my earlier point about Cincinnati being a donut city. However, there's a different reason behind what you're seeing. It's just easier to do content in the suburbs because you can show a house and it's going to look a lot like all of the other houses in that neighborhood. Or it's easier to sum up the vibe of a suburban area or neighborhood because it is more homogeneous by nature. But that's not what we're doing on this channel. We're talking about the neighborhoods and areas in Cincinnati and near Cincinnati that have a lot going on. They have nuances because this area is not nearly as homogeneous as it would seem online, which is why I know that there's a spot for you in Cincinnati, and it might not be the most exciting move for you, or it could be the right move for you for now. But I know this was a long list, and I'm still sure it didn't cover everything. So go to the comments, let me know, what did I miss? What are you hearing about Cincinnati? And if you are making that move or considering the move, go and see the video notes where I've got all of my contact information and reach out to me because I'd love to help you make the move to Cincinnati, or even if it's to decide that the move isn't for you, I'm always going to shoot you straight on that. And until next time, we'll see you around Cincinnati.